Okay, so here we are with our last session on unlocking the Bible, um, finding Jesus in anything that you read in the Scripture, in the Old Testament, New Testament, whatever. And today we're going to be looking more at the kind of the foreshadowing of the Old Testament and some of the stories on how they were representations and pointing us to Jesus and seeing what we can learn about what it means for us to be in Christ now, even through some of these Old Testament stories and what they are saying about that. You know, I think if you've grown up in church, we've heard a few examples of foreshadowing. You know, some of the obvious ones, like when Abraham was asked to sacrifice his only son, and so he went and he was obedient. And then right at the last moment, God provided a substitute, provided that ram. And, you know, we've heard that that was a foreshadow of how Jesus became our substitute sacrifice. And then, of course, you have the Passover. Um, Whoever painted the blood of a lamb on their doorpost, death would pass over them and not take their firstborn. And, you know, we're always shown how that was a picture of the fact that Jesus' blood covers us from God's wrath, and that the blood was painted in the picture of a cross on the doors. And so those are the ones that I think most of us have kind of been shown that those stories point us to the gospel, but haven't ever realized that all the stories of the Old Testament point us to the gospel and not just those most obvious ones. And so we're going to look at some of those today. And the first one I want us to look at is a familiar story of Moses parting the Red Sea in Exodus chapter 14. And I'm just going to read a portion of that starting in verse 13. So the thing is, they had been released from Egypt, and they came up on the Red Sea, and they were pretty much trapped. They had the sea in front of them, the Egyptian army in hot pursuit behind them, and they were in an impossible situation. But starting in verse 13, but Moses said to the people, "Do not fear. Stand by and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians who you have seen today, you will never see them again forever. The Lord will fight for you while you keep silent." And then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the sons of Israel to go forward. As for you, lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, and the sons of Israel shall go through the midst of the sea on dry land. As for me, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so that they will go in after them, and I will be honored through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots, his horsemen. Then the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, when I am honored through Pharaoh, through his chariots, through his horsemen." The angel of God who had been going before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel, and there was the cloud along with the darkness, and it gave light at night. Thus the one did not come near the other all night. And in verse 21, then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord swept the sea back by a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry land so that the waters were divided. And of course, we know the people of God, the Israelites, they crossed over safely. And once the last one got over, the Egyptian army follows right behind. They are in that same stretch there, and God closes the waters back over and wipes the Egyptian army out. So let's just look at this. How would y'all see this story as a picture of the gospel? So let's just first identify who is Jesus in the story.
I would say Moses.
Yes, it is Moses. Moses is the type. He is Jesus, a representation of Jesus in the story. So it's Jesus leading his people, us, out of the slavery of sin into the promised land of salvation. Um, Talked before about how physical land in the Old Testament is usually a metaphor for life. And so, so if that's the case, if that's what this story is telling us about, then we should be able to learn some things about our salvation from this story. Because here's the thing about identifying an Old Testament story and how it represents the gospel. It's not just, oh, neat, we see all these parallels between that and the gospel. Just identifying the parallels and the symbolism isn't enough. It's like, okay, then what can we learn about it? Because there's a reason why those parallels are there. It's not just to be, oh, isn't that neat how thousands of years before it was pointing to Jesus. No, that what can we learn about it? And so there's some things in here I believe we can learn. So, for instance, in verse 13, what does that tell us about salvation? Verse 13, Moses said, do not fear, stand by and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you will never see them again forever. So from that, what can we learn about our salvation?
Well, the first thing I thought is he said, stand by. Like they didn't have to do anything.
Right. Yeah. And see what the Lord will accomplish
Right.
for you
Exactly.
today.
It's the Lord that does that.
Salvation is all his
Yeah.
doing. You know what's neat about that? If you look up the Hebrew word for salvation, it is the word Yeshua,
Mm-hmm.
which is the name of Jesus.
Right.
And so essentially, Moses is saying, stand by and see Jesus today, which I think is so cool.
Mm-hmm.
They could do nothing to help themselves in that
Right.
situation.
Yeah, Jesus is going to do it for you, which is what happens at salvation. But then he says, for the Egyptians, what does the Egyptians represent for us? The sin that we come out of, right? Whom you have seen today, you will never see them again forever. I mean, that just parallels the truth that that God says in Jeremiah, your sin I will remember no more.
Yeah.
Right. So your sin is not just covered, like I talked about Sunday, it's completely taken away.
Yeah.
I mean, that is good news right there.
Yeah,
It's
isn't
very
it?
good
You know?
news.
So that's what it tells us about our sin. And then again in verse 18, what is the purpose of our salvation? What is that ultimately for? Verse 18, then the Egyptians will know that I'm the Lord when I'm honored through Pharaoh, through his chariots and his horsemen.
That's bringing him glory.
Right.
Him glory.
Our salvation is not about us.
Right.
It's about the glory of God. What he did was for him to get all the glory.
Yeah.
Which is that's what that verse tells us there. Here's a neat symbolism. How Moses is a picture of Jesus in verse 21. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord swept back the sea. So we picture Moses like this. When he did this, the sea parted. Just like when Jesus did this on the cross, the way for us to be made right with God was made possible for us.
Veil was torn.
I think
Yeah.
something else that I just realized, and
I like
I've
that.
actually preached this through that lens a couple of different times, but one thing it says they walked on dry land.
Mm-hmm.
The completeness.
Yeah.
It wasn't muddy.
It wasn't muggy.
They wasn't dodging mud puddles. They weren't having to work their way around things. It was a straight dry path, and that's the same way our salvation is. It's not something that we have to work around or do something to gain.
Complete work,
Yes,
not
it's
a-
complete. It's finished.
Yeah.
It's finished.
And
Yeah.
and that just come to me when I was sitting there reading that. It's
That's good.
Say that again.
he has, because in verse 13 it says he will accomplish.
Yeah.
Now what you said last week, he has accomplished it because he has it. It's completed. It's dry.
Yeah.
It's done.
Yeah.
And that's
That's
crazy.
What were you
Well, she
saying?
was making reference to when you were talking about when Jesus was spread. I mentioned it's like the veil was torn. It made a way, and so the veil was torn. So the whole measuring up to the law, trying to keep the law, all that was torn.
Yep.
And he did it all.
Just like the sea parted.
That's right.
Yeah. Pretty neat. All right. Anything else about that before we go to another one? Good there?
Yep.
All right. Let's go back to Genesis for a minute. Genesis chapter 41. So Joseph has been imprisoned, and they get word that he is able to interpret dreams. And Pharaoh has a dream and they share it with Joseph. And so Joseph interprets it beginning in verse 29. He says, "Behold, 7 years of great abundance are coming in all the land of Egypt, and after them 7 years of famine will come, and all the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will ravage the land. So the abundance will be unknown in the land because of that subsequent famine, for it will be very severe. Now, as for the repeating of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it means that the matter is determined by God, and God will quickly bring it about. Now let Pharaoh look for a man discerning and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh take action to appoint overseers in charge of the land, and let him exact a fifth of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 years of abundance. Then let them gather all the food in those good years that are coming, and store up grain for food in the cities under Pharaoh's authority, and let them guard it. Let the food become as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine which will occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land will not perish during the famine." Now the proposal seemed good to Pharaoh and all his servants. So Joseph is wisely telling him, during these years of abundance, we need to start setting back and storing something, so that when these years of famine come, we'll be able to get through it. And most of us know the story that they did that, and it was such an abundance that people from other lands heard about all these provisions that they had stockpiled, and so they came, which led to Joseph's estranged family in Israel coming and being reunited with him when they thought he was dead. Now, what does this have to do with the gospel? Well, Joseph, again, we often, our default is to put ourselves at the center of the story,
Right.
and say, this is a lesson to us on being prepared. And there are a lot of people who are into this, not hoarding, but stockpiling provisions, because the end of the world's coming. They want to be ready and have all this food and provisions and all this stuff prepared. And they'll often point to they'll often point to the story of Joseph as, this is why it is good for us to do that. But is that what this story is telling us? Because by doing that, number one, it makes it about us. Right. It puts us at the center of the story. But what if Joseph represents Jesus? Mm-hmm. And if he is at the center of the story, then what does it tell us? And could Joseph be another type of Jesus? Well, I think if we look at some of the verses that follow, we really see that. Because listen, starting in verse 38, listen to the parallels between what Pharaoh is going to do with Joseph and then with Jesus. So then Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this in whom is a divine spirit?" So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has informed you of all this, there is no one so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and according to your command, all my people shall do homage. Only in the throne I will be greater than you." Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put the gold necklace around his neck. He had him ride in a second chariot, and they proclaimed before him, "Bow the knee," and set him over the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Though I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission no one shall raise his hand or foot in the land of Egypt." I mean, we see some parallels there between God and Jesus and how he had given him all authority, Yeah. So if Joseph represents Jesus in the story, then what does that tell us about this whole provision thing?
That he's going to provide everything we
It tells us that Jesus has already stockpiled all the provision we will ever need.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is the lesson in that story, which goes to, where is the address now? It slips my mind, but he says, God has given you everything you need for life and godliness. Mm-hmm. Everything you need. And that's the story there, that God, He provides all of your needs.
Mhm.
Well, when you put yourself in the story instead of Jesus, then it does create that mentality. I got to take care of myself.
Yes.
I have to make sure that I'm, and so if you replace that with Jesus, then that's where that trust comes in. And so I think you have to. I mean, it has to be that way. Then the story becomes more about you than it does about Jesus.
Yeah. And it changes the way we live too. If we really trusted God with our provision, that He sees what's coming, He's already got everything ready for us. I mean, is it not kind of a sad situation that Jesus over and over tells us to take care of those in need, but yet we got a bunch of Christians stockpiling things that are just sitting there in some storage building while people around them are in need.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't really line up very much with the gospel.
Right.
When God's going, look, I've got all your needs covered. That should be able to free you to give abundantly. Everything I give to you, I want you to give, and I want you to go meet the needs of others. And you can do that because in this story here, I'll show you, I've got everything stockpiled already for you.
Yeah.
You don't have to fear anything. You don't have to take anything into your own hands. I've got it. So just trust me and get things into play for the kingdom. Kind of changes things, doesn't
Well,
it?
it does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, a lot of times we walk by fear and not by faith and trusting God that He's actually guiding us.
Yep.
But He does.
He does.
He absolutely does.
Yep. Okay, now go a few chapters over to Genesis 48. So this is a little further down in the story when Joseph has been reunited with his father and his brothers. And so Joseph wants to introduce his two sons to his dad, to Jacob, and have him bless them, just like, the tradition of the blessing of the father. And so he introduces them to him. And then starting in verse 13, Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand toward Joseph's left, because that was the younger son, and Manasseh, who was the older son, with his left hand toward Israel's right, and brought them close to him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, crossing his hands, although Manasseh was the firstborn. He blessed Joseph and said, and so he gives him this blessing. And then verse 17, when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on Ephraim's head, and it displeased him, and he grasped his father's hand and removed it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to his father, not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also will become a people, and he also will be great. However, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. So we'll see what's going on here. The right hand of the father, the one giving the blessing, goes on the oldest, the firstborn, and he receives the majority of the inheritance. The left hand would have gone on the younger, but Jacob, or is known as Israel now, he crosses his hands and puts the left on the older and the right on the younger. What do y'all see that as a picture of?
The cross.
It's what God did at the cross when he took his firstborn, Jesus. Everything that was intended for his firstborn went to us, and everything that was intended for us, the condemnation of sin and death and everything, went on the firstborn.
Mm-hmm.
So at the cross, God crossed his arms the same way that Joseph did for his two sons right here. And we can say, well, is there any other evidence of that in the Bible? You quoted it in your testimony a while ago. He became
sin.
He who knew no sin, the firstborn, became sin, which was intended for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God.
Yeah.
He switched them.
Wow.
And Jesus took what was intended for us and gave what was intended for him onto Is that good news or what?
That's
I mean,
phenomenal.
it is.
Changes
Never
everything.
thought of it like that.
Changes everything.
It's awesome. All right, we'll do 2 more. The next one is in the book of Judges, chapter 11. Should have had these marked already, I guess. Judges chapter 11. So this is about Jephthah and his tragic vow. So Jephthah goes out and leads the people of God against their enemies. And in verse 30, he made this vow to God. It says, Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, if you will indeed give the sons of Ammon into my hand, then it shall be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the sons of Ammon, it shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. So he just flippantly throws out there, God, if you'll give this victory to me, the first thing that comes running out to greet me from my house when I return home, I'm gonna sacrifice that, give that as an offering to you. Verse 34, when Jephthah came to his house at Mizpah, behold, his daughter was coming out to meet him with tambourines and with dancing. Now she was his one and only child. Besides her, he had no son or daughter. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you are among those who trouble me. For I have given my word to the Lord, and I cannot take it back. So she said to him, My father, you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me as you have said, since the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the sons of Ammon. She said to her father, Let this thing be done for me. Let me alone for 2 months, that I may go to the mountains and weep because of my virginity, I and my companions. Then he said, Go. So he sent her away for 2 months, and she left with her companions and wept on the mountains because of her virginity. At the end of 2 months, she returned to her father, who did to her according to the vow which he had made. And she had no relations with the man. Thus it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went yearly to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite for 4 days in the year. So what do y'all see there as a picture of the gospel?
Is the daughter Jesus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The daughter is Jesus in this, and some people have issue with that. They tell them, say, wait a minute, she's a girl and Jesus is a guy. How can that be? Well, if you remember back when we talked about foreshadows, foreshadows are incomplete. They're not perfect,
Yeah.
right? And so if you look at a shadow in the natural, we cast a shadow. There are some things that we can see about that shadow. In fact, I had a picture somewhere, and I don't know where it is. Anyway, so there's an example that I use in the class. I have a picture. There's a shadow up on the wall of this lady, and you can see that she has a ponytail. You can see that it's a lady, and she appears to be pregnant. And so there are some things that we can see about the substance that's casting that shadow, but we can't see everything. But then when I flip the page back, you see that it was a lady carrying a bundle of laundry. That she wasn't pregnant, she was just carrying laundry. We see it fully once you see the substance of what's casting the shadow. Well, it's the same thing in here. You know, the shadows are incomplete. They're not perfect pictures of what the substance is casting. Just like David. David obviously was a type. He was a representation of Jesus. And some people, but he was an adulterous murderer, yeah, because he was not the substance. He was just a shadow of it.
Right.
Well, it's the same thing here. I mean, yes, she was a daughter, but she was also the only one, the firstborn, the only child of Jephthah here. So if she represents Jesus in the story, then what other parallels do we see here?
Well, she accepted the will.
Yeah, she willingly accepted herself to be sacrificed. Yeah, just like Jesus did.
For the victory? I mean, does that play into that too?
What?
Because it was all because of the victory. It was for the victory.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that there was a victory that he did this for, yeah, that definitely would. Okay, so let's goes back to, okay, what does this tell me? What can I learn about God or about my salvation from this story? So yeah, it's neat that we see these parallels, but what can I learn
You
from
can't
that?
break his promise. It's a no.
Exactly.
You can't break.
It tells us that God will go to any lengths to fulfill his promises.
Mhm.
So this story is just screaming at us the faithfulness of God, that no matter what, he is going to be true to his word. That's what Jephthah did. As much as it cost him, Jephthah was true to his word.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think he thought his daughter was going to be the first one
No,
out there? Of
he
course
would have
not.
never made the vow.
No, I mean,
No,
probably
he
like
was right
today, it was probably his dog that was coming out
Yeah.
to greet him, you know?
Right.
And no problem, the pet, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll sacrifice that to God, but it was his daughter. He's like, oh my gosh. So
Yeah.
what it cost him to fulfill his vow. God, all throughout, ever since the fall, he had made these promises of what he is going to do. But he is so faithful to that it cost him his only son to be able to fulfill those things.
Yeah.
It just tells us all the promises that are us in Christ. He is faithful. He is
Yeah.
faithful. He is faithful.
He's
he is
committed
faithful.
to his word.
Yeah.
Yes.
He is absolutely committed to do what his word says
Yeah.
he will do.
And just like what I said before, that our relationship with God is more about his commitment to us than it is
That's right.
our commitment to him.
We waver, but he never wavers.
Right. Never. And then we also see the fact that, she was a virgin, which was a symbolic of purity.
Mhm.
Jesus was never sinned. He was the spotless lamb. So there are a lot of parallels in that story there. Anything else in that one before we move on to the last thing? So we're just kind of picking different ones, but if you use some of this, what we're doing here, you can go to pretty much any Old Testament story and find it. I mean, Jesus even said, if you seek me, you will find me.
Yes.
Right.
And I think that even applies to the scriptures. If you
Absolutely.
go through there and you're looking for him, the Holy Spirit's going to reveal him to you. Okay, so this last one, I actually want to go to the New Testament. So go all the way to the obscure book of Philemon. Philemon, it's only one chapter long. Philemon is a book, a letter that Paul wrote to a man named Philemon while Paul was in prison. And he is writing to him about a servant of Philemon's named Onesimus. And apparently Philemon and Onesimus had a big falling out. And so Onesimus came and found Paul in prison and told him what was going on. And so Paul is writing back to Philemon, telling him that he needs to, because Philemon is a believer, he needs to treat him as a fellow believer and not just as a servant. And they need to reconcile this relationship. But the key to this whole thing is a picture of the gospel.
Yeah.
And I love what he says in verse 17. He says, if then you regard me a partner, accept him as you would me. But if he has wronged you in any way or owes you anything, charge that to my account.
Yes.
And so we see that, Paul is essentially Jesus here,
Yeah.
writing to the Father about us. Accept him as you would me.
Yeah.
That's 1 John 4:17. As he is, so also are we in this world. God accepts us the way he accepts his only son. And then if he owes you anything, charge that to my account.
Yeah.
Jesus paid our debt.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Isn't that so neat that even the little old obscure book of Philemon, the gospel is there?
Mm-hmm.
Because it is everywhere throughout the Bible. All right. Any questions? I got it.
That's good.
Yeah.
I
Very
love
good.
this.
Love it.
I love this. So, you at home, y'all do this yourself. I hope this is giving you a little bit more of a desire to search the scriptures, to apply some of these tools and principles yourself and finding Jesus. If you're doing that and you get stuck or there's some question you have, don't hesitate to either call up here or send an email or something and ask. I mean, all of us will be more than happy to help you out in this, because it is so good. I mean, I believe this is the way that God intended for his word to be read, because like we looked at before, this is the way that Jesus taught the scriptures.
Yeah.
Beginning with the prophets, he showed them the things concerning himself in all the scriptures.
Mm.
And so that's how we need to read it today. It's not about us.
No.
It's about him.
Yeah.
All right, church. Hope you enjoyed this, and we will see y'all next week. Love you.